Hello, everybody, and welcome to the last edition of Charts with Dan for the year 2021. We're a day later than usual because yesterday I went into my usual routine. I did some prep Sunday night. I got up. I was waiting for the final numbers to come in, and they didn't come in yesterday. I got up today. The final numbers still haven't come in. So I guess Sony has, well, they do have a lot of money to count, to be fair, but we still don't have final numbers from Sony for any of the holiday weekend, and even yesterday, Monday, we have some estimates. Those have been folded into a lot of the figures for today, but I decided, we just got to pull the trigger. So I like to wait until I have final numbers because I like to bring you the most accurate and up-to-date information, but we don't have those, and I didn't want to delay the show another day, so apologies in advance, although I really can't do anything to help that, but the Spider-Man numbers, as well as a couple of the other movies, are based on the estimates, given that we don't have the finals yet. Before we get started, I want to thank today's sponsor, Carbon Health, who will be a sponsor of Charts well into 2022. I'm very happy to be in a partnership with them because I like what they're doing, which is to help provide accessible and affordable health care for everyone. If you're traveling as we approach the new year, you're away from home, and you feel like you may need medical attention, you can download the Carbon Health app to see if there is a Carbon Health facility near you. In addition, with all this news of the Omicron variant seeming to spread even more quickly, Carbon Health also provides COVID testing. They've performed over 1.5 million COVID tests so far. Again, if you're traveling and you feel like you need a COVID test, at-home testing right now is very difficult to come by. Get that Carbon Health app, see if there's a facility near you, and they'll be able to do that test there as well. Let's jump into the holiday weekend this past weekend, Friday through Sunday, and also what you could call the 5-day holiday weekend, which would be Wednesday through Sunday, because we had some movies that opened last Wednesday. But as we knew would happen, Spider-Man No Way Home stays on top for the 3-day holiday weekend, $84.5 million. We will put those numbers in perspective in just a few minutes. Sing 2 in second place with $22.3 million. The Matrix Resurrections, there was thought that Sing might top The Matrix, but The Matrix really did not deliver anywhere close to what people were expecting, even given the hybrid HBO Max release. Third place, a distant third, with $12 million. The Kingsman in fourth place with $5.9 million. Another disappointing result for that film. And then this is another estimate on American Underdog, which is a story about Rams quarterback and later Cardinals quarterback Kurt Warner at $5.89 million. But it is very possible that it could have perhaps taken that number 4 spot. We just don't have a final number for that film in yet. So those are the 3-day numbers. Let's look at the 5-day numbers, and you see that from last Wednesday through Sunday, this encompasses the full openings of Sing 2, Matrix Resurrection, Kingsman, and American Underdog. Spider-Man was the number 1 movie with $141.6 million over that holiday week. Sing 2 in second place with $37.9 million. The Matrix Resurrections in third with $22.5 million. The Kingsman with $9.5 million, and American Underdog with $6.2 million. And when we look at the Spider-Man numbers, just kind of stepping back from everything, there are a couple of things I wanted to note. Number one, the numbers are good on Spider-Man, but they could have been even better when you look at the way that the schedule fell. Christmas Eve and the beginning part of Christmas Day are not particularly strong movie-going times. That was the Friday and Saturday of its quote-unquote second weekend. So we saw a substantial drop. I think it was around 68% between weekend 1 and weekend 2, but that was partially because you had a day and a half there really that have traditionally a little bit of a lower attendance. That starts picking up on Christmas night. Sunday's a big day, and then this week is also big because there's a lot of people that are still not working, a lot of people still not in school. That's why Spider-Man did, I think, around $25 million yesterday. It's because people are still going to the movies. Something else that's interesting, and it just kind of goes about narrative and how people report about movies they like versus movies they may not like, is back in 2017, there was a similar situation where The Last Jedi in its second weekend, its Sunday was Christmas Eve, which is not a very big movie-going day, and so it had a big drop in its second weekend. As a matter of fact, it was almost identical to the drop that Spider-Man No Way Home had, right around 70%. And I remember very much at that time that there were so many stories about The Last Jedi and what a disaster it was because it had this massive drop in its second weekend, the biggest drop in the history of Star Wars. Here you have something with Spider-Man No Way Home. Almost exactly the same thing happened. One day of its window was in a very low day of box office attendance. It had a big drop right around 70%, and yet I haven't seen those same stories. I haven't seen the stories about how Spider-Man No Way Home is a massive disaster or how the MCU is in trouble, etc., because people like that movie more. So you don't see that kind of thing. This is why I say you can't just take the numbers at face value all the time. You have to do research. You have to look into why they are the way that they are, because they can be spun just like any other piece of information to support the pre-existing narrative that somebody already has. So that was something that I found very interesting, that there were just not all of these news stories on different sites and YouTube, etc., about what a disaster Spider-Man No Way Home was, because it had a 70% drop in its second weekend because people weren't invested in that narrative. Very interesting thing. So when we look at the weekend just in general compared to the 2019 box office, we see after finally topping the box office in week 51 versus 2019, we dip well below that figure by over $50 million for the last week of 2021. So back to the pattern. And now that we have a full year's pattern, and I've been pointing this out throughout the year, when you look at what the box office did this year, it followed the same patterns as it usually does. It's just that with the exception of week 51, we could never quite do as much as 2019 did. But we're going to keep this going. I'm going to continue tracking the 2022 box office as we go, comparing it to 2021. How did we do versus different weeks of the year? Before we get into the numbers with Spider-Man and where it's standing in the record books, etc., I did want to say a few words about The Matrix Resurrections, because that was a big story this weekend. It did not do great at the box office. As I mentioned, $22.5 million over its first 5 days. Something that we've looked at, though, with these HBO Max films in particular was how did it do on streaming, because that was part of Warner's strategy this year. This was the last film in this rollout for 2021 of all their movies going theatrical and day and date on HBO Max at the same time. And when we look at the numbers from Samba TV, which, as we talked about, is not representative of the complete number of people that watch these films, but when you can compare them against other numbers that Samba TV has reported, you can get some measure of comparison. According to Samba TV, The Matrix Resurrections pulled in about 2.8 million viewers in its first 5 days. That is lower than Godzilla vs. Kong. Godzilla vs. Kong brought in about 3.6 million viewers in its first 5 days. Also keep in mind that Godzilla vs. Kong opened to $31 million, so $9 million higher than Matrix Resurrections in 3 days instead of 5 days, and in 500 fewer theaters. So what we're looking at here, I think, is a combination of low demand. It's been almost 20 years since the last Matrix film. How many people were actually clamoring for the fourth film? And also really bad word of mouth. The critical score was fresh but low for this movie. The audience score trending downward. Word of mouth, particularly on social media, not good on The Matrix Resurrections. So we have here a film that I think you can't chalk up and say like, well, everybody stayed home and watched it on HBO Max. Because when you have a comparable movie with Godzilla vs. Kong, more people watched it on HBO Max, and more people went to see it at the movie theater, despite the fact that back in March, the theatrical business was much different. I don't think The Matrix skews old enough that you can look at the turnout like we did, for example, with West Side Story and say, well, the virus really depressed turnout for this movie compared to that other movie. I think that the audiences are too similar for this movie and other movies that are succeeding in the marketplace. So I think what you have here is just a movie that not a whole lot of people liked and maybe not a whole lot of people wanted. Keep in mind, the streaming thing is not going away. It's already been announced, for example, just this week, that The Batman will have a theatrical exclusivity window, but only 45 days. Warner's has announced that The Batman will hit HBO Max on its 46th day of release. So even though we are going to go back to windows where movies are exclusively theatrical, the time between when it's in theaters and when it's available at home and how it's available at home is still very much in flux. Let's talk about Spider-Man No Way Home and where it stands as far as all-time grosses and studio grosses. First of all, looking at the 10-day opening. So these are the top 5 domestic grosses through 10 days. For a while, Spider-Man No Way Home was running neck and neck with Star Wars The Force Awakens, but Force Awakens has now started to pull away. So when we look at the top grosses through 10 days of release, Black Panther's at number 5 with just over $400 million. Avengers Infinity War is at number 4 with $453 million. Spider-Man No Way Home is in third place with $470 million through 10 days. This takes it through the end of the box office day on Sunday. Of course, these are estimates, so that number may go up. Then you have a big gap. You have Star Wars The Force Awakens at number 2 with $540 million and Avengers Endgame with $620 million. So what we're seeing here is Spider-Man No Way Home continuing to pace ahead of Avengers Infinity War, falling off the pace of Star Wars The Force Awakens. But keep in mind that The Force Awakens is the highest domestic grossing film of all time. So it's not so bad that you're falling off of that pace, because it's a pretty unsustainable pace unless you're going to top those numbers. When we look at Spider-Man grosses all time, it is already the number one grossing Spider-Man film. After 10 days of release, it tops 2002's Spider-Man, which was the number one domestic Spider-Man grosser. So we now have Spider-Man 3 in the 5th spot, with Spider-Man 2 at number 4, Spider-Man Far From Home at number 3, Spider-Man Now at number 2, and Spider-Man No Way Home at number 1 as it approaches $500 million. That $495 million mark, by the way, is inclusive of yesterday's box office, the estimated numbers that were sent in. So that is current as of today. When we adjust for inflation, Spider-Man No Way Home still has some work to do. You see Spider-Man Far From Home at number 5, Spider-Man 3 at number 4, Spider-Man No Way Home, adjusted for inflation, now the third highest grossing Spider-Man film domestically with $495 million. It will top Spider-Man 2, because Spider-Man 2 is in second place with $542 million. No Way Home is probably going to be there by the end of the day tomorrow. And then you have Spider-Man with $626 million. If I had to wager, I would say that Spider-Man No Way Home is probably going to hit that mark as well. So I think that we're going to have a new number one domestic grossing Spider-Man film, no matter which way you cut it. If you want to look at the raw numbers, if you want to adjust for inflation, I think Spider-Man No Way Home is going to be the number one grossing Spider-Man film of all time. When we look at Sony, the top 5 grosses all time: Spider-Man 2 at number 5, Spider-Man Far From Home at number 4, Spider-Man at number 3, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle. People forget just how big of a movie that was. Prior to Spider-Man No Way Home, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle was the highest grossing film in the history of Sony Pictures. That record has now been obliterated by Spider-Man No Way Home with $495 million. So now the highest grossing film from Sony Pictures of all time. And when you adjust for inflation and look at the history of Sony, or as it was known before, Columbia, Spider-Man No Way Home not quite yet in that top 5. Number 5 is Tootsie with $523.7 million, followed by Spider-Man 2 with $542 million, Spider-Man with $626 million, essentially tied with 1984's Ghostbusters, also with $626 million, $626.4. As a matter of fact, depending on how you adjust for inflation, some people would have those two transposed and have Spider-Man at number 2. And then you see number 1, Close Encounters of the Third Kind at $685 million. So if Spider-Man No Way Home can get to about that $700 million domestic mark, which is not out of reach for it if it continues to track the way that it's doing, then it will also be the highest grossing film in the history of Sony Pictures, both when you look at the raw numbers and when you adjust for inflation. It will most definitely be in that top 5. Looking at the MCU in general, the top 5 highest grossing films in the MCU, Spider-Man No Way Home has broken into the top 5. It is the 5th highest grossing MCU film. It's got a little ways to cover with the Avengers at number 4 with $623.3 million. Then we have Infinity War with $678 million. As I mentioned, Spider-Man No Way Home tracking ahead of Infinity War, so it looks like we're going to be looking at least a number that big, unless something drastic happens, which honestly could happen. Then we have Black Panther at number 2 with just over $700 million, and Avengers Endgame with $858.3 million. Now, Spider-Man No Way Home is not getting to Avengers Endgame's number. That's not going to happen. Not domestically and not worldwide. But if it can get to $700 million, it could very easily be the second highest grossing film of all time in the MCU, supplanting Black Panther. We're just going to have to see how it does in the days and weeks ahead. It is certainly within reach. When we look at the top per theater average, Spider-Man No Way Home, number 1, $19,494 per theater in 4,336 theaters. So theater owners still enjoying a nice return from Spider-Man No Way Home in its second weekend. And then when we look at the limited release films, so these are movies that are in 1,000 theaters or fewer, so you're not going to see a movie like No Way Home on here. Licorice Pizza had a big expansion to 786 theaters in its 5th week of release. It is number 1 on the limited release chart with $1.9 million. At number 2 is a movie from India. It is called 83. It's the story of the 1983 Indian World Cup cricket team. It was delayed from an April 2020 release due to the pandemic. It was number 2 at the limited release box office in 480 theaters at $1.7 million. So continued success in limited release, very targeted and successful release strategy for films from India. The A24 film Red Rocket in its third week stays at number 3 with $150,000. Parallel Mothers, the latest film from Pedro Almodovar, is in third place in just 3 theaters with $38,249. And in fifth place, the Japanese film Drive My Car in 16 theaters brings in $19,172. There are a couple of movies that are not on this chart that are notable. One of them is The Tragedy of Macbeth, which is from Joel Cohen. It stars Frances McDormand and Denzel Washington. Apple is releasing the movie on its streaming service in 2022, but it opened in a select number of theaters. Reportedly, it made about $110,000, which would put it on this chart. However, like the other streaming services, Apple is choosing not to share its box office grosses. So there are no official numbers on how it did. Exhibitors, etc., are reporting it did about 110K, but I don't include those numbers because they're not official. Still a source of frustration. I really do wish that these streamers would report their numbers. I don't know why they're not, because it keeps them out of the conversation theatrically. I don't think that helps their award chances or their visibility, but whatever. They're going to do what they're going to do. We just have to get used to it at this point. Another movie I wanted to note, it wasn't on this list, but it's a movie called Memoria, and it brought in a little under $7,000, so not a particularly remarkable performance. But the thing about the film that is remarkable, it stars Tilda Swinton, which, yes, that's remarkable. But there's another thing that's remarkable, which is that the movie is going to play in perpetuity in one theater at a time for 1 week at a time. And then it'll move to the next city. So it will never be in more than one theater, and it will never be released digitally or on home video. So literally the only way you will ever be able to see this movie is if you live in a city or go to a city where the movie is playing that particular week. This is almost kind of like a performance art kind of thing, but Memoria making $7,000, but you're probably going to see this thing on the chart for quite some time because it's literally just going to be a traveling roadshow from week to week, and you can only see it in one place at a time. Let's look at the Christmas weekend internationally. Spider-Man No Way Home, easily the number 1 film at $121,400,000. At number 2 is a movie that was actually on the chart last week, but under a different name. It's called Fireflies in the Sun, but it's being marketed as Sheep Without a Shepherd 2. This is a movie that is a remake of the Denzel Washington film from the early 2000s called John Q. And it's called Fireflies in the Sun, but it's being marketed under the name Sheep Without a Shepherd 2 because that is a popular name for a film that succeeded in the past. So we have a film in Fireflies in the Sun that is being sold as a sequel to a previous film, despite sharing nothing in common with the movie that came before it, just capitalizing on the name recognition. On a related note, The Matrix Resurrections was a close number 2 internationally with $35 million, followed by Encanto with $19.2 million, and then another Chinese film, B for Busy, with $10.2 million. So if you take the international market, combine it with the domestic market, we get the top 5 worldwide, and Spider-Man No Way Home with over $200 million, $202.9 million, followed by The Matrix Resurrections with $47 million, Sing 2 with $42.9 million, Fireflies in the Sun with $35.8 million, and The King's Man with $13.2 million. Perhaps the biggest piece of news about Spider-Man No Way Home is that over the holiday, it became the latest film to join the $1 billion club, and it did so in really good time. When we look at the films that were the fastest to $1 billion, the quickest was Avengers Endgame. It took it 5 days to gross $1 billion. Second quickest was Avengers Infinity War, 11 days. But you see Spider-Man No Way Home and The Force Awakens both tied for the third quickest films to $1 billion in just 12 days. In 12 days of release, Spider-Man No Way Home was able to hit that mark. That's pretty impressive. And it's even more impressive when you consider the way that the market has worked for Spider-Man No Way Home. There's been a continuing conflict between the MCU and China, and honestly between a lot of Hollywood studios in China. We have seen so many movies, including Venom and a lot of the Disney films, the Marvel films from this year that have never come out in China. Spider-Man No Way Home has not come out in China. It has been a big chunk of the box office for a lot of the films that have crossed $1 billion worldwide. As a matter of fact, since 2010, there are only 2 films that have crossed $1 billion worldwide without a Chinese release. One of them is Joker. The other one is Spider-Man No Way Home. So especially considering that China has been a huge chunk of the money for so many movies that have crossed $1 billion, particularly in the 2010s going into the 2020s when China was much more of a world market, was letting more films in that were drawing big grosses. For No Way Home to do what it did in the time that it did without China is something else that is really impressive. No Way Home is also a big grosser for Sony worldwide. When we look at the top 5 Sony Pictures all-time worldwide grossers, Spider-Man No Way Home is at number 3, $1,082,231,855. It's already passed Spider-Man 3 and Jumanji. It's only the third Sony film ever to pass $1 billion. And then look, I mean, it could very well be past this point already. Skyfall is at number 2 with $1,110,000,000. Spider-Man Far From Home at number 1 with $1,132,000,000. So that is one thing that is most definitely going to happen. Not only is Spider-Man No Way Home going to be $1 billion grosser, it is also going to be the top grossing film in Sony Pictures history, both domestically and worldwide. It's also, I was reading a story in Deadline today, already turning a profit, a couple $100 million profit as it stands. There are reports saying that if it could get to that $700 million domestic mark, which, as I said, I think is very much within reach, it could profit to the tune of $500 million or more. So this is not just a big box office success. This is going to be a huge, profitable movie for Sony and also Disney. They split the cost. Disney fronted 25% of the production costs. Sony fronted the other 75%. That means that Disney gets 25% of the profit. Sony gets 75%. So the mouse, as with everything else, it seems like these days, gets a cut of Spider-Man's success, but Sony is also going to have plenty left over for them. I mean, this is when we went into Spider-Man No Way Home, I said this is going to be the movie I think that you can say was a success, and you don't have to put any sort of pandemic asterisks on it. But this is an unqualified success, no matter what time of year, when it came out, etc. There's really no way to spin it as anything but an absolute triumph, an absolute success box office wise, and it's still going. I mean, we're going to see this thing going through January. There's no competition this weekend. Literally, there are no new movies opening this upcoming weekend. Really, its biggest box office competition doesn't come until the newest Scream movie opens, and that's well into January. So this thing has got some runway. None of the other movies that are out are posing any kind of competition whatsoever. You don't have a Greatest Showman. You don't have a Jumanji. You don't have something out there that's plucking people away. Sing 2 did well, but I don't think it's drawing a whole lot of eyeballs away from Spider-Man No Way Home. This is going to be very interesting to see just how high it goes. When we look at the 2021 box office worldwide, Spider-Man No Way Home is now the number 1 grossing film of the year with over $1 billion, the first post-pandemic billion-dollar grosser. It knocks The Battle at Lake Changjin down to number 2. It knocks Hi Mom down to number 3. So China, even though it will generate the most total box office this year, will not have the highest grossing film of 2021 worldwide. That will be Spider-Man No Way Home. No Time to Die drops 1 spot to number 4. F9 drops 1 spot to number 5. Detective Chinatown 3 drops 1 spot to number 6. Venom Let There Be Carnage stays at number 7, but it has crossed the $500 million mark. That is another Sony film. They do not have to split that money with Disney, so that's another $500 million hit from Sony. They're having a good year. Godzilla vs. Kong is at number 8. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at number 9, and Eternals at number 10 with $400 million. So we see now in what looks to be like it's likely to be at least close to the final box office chart of 2021. 6 American films, No Time to Die, an American-British co-production. So you can, let's say 6.5, and then 3 films from China on the final 2021 worldwide box office list. There could be some adjustment there. Let's look at the 2021 box office domestically. I mean, this was no contest from the second day that Spider-Man was in release. Spider-Man No Way Home at number 1, very close to crossing $500 million domestically. Shang-Chi at number 2, Venom Let There Be Carnage at 3, Black Widow at 4, F9 at 5, Eternals at number 6, No Time to Die at 7, A Quiet Place Part 2 at 8, Free Guy at 9, Ghostbusters Afterlife at number 10. There could be some adjustments here. I think that it's pretty likely that Ghostbusters Afterlife is going to jump over Free Guy to be the number 9 movie of the year, but I think it's going to stop right there. Other than that, I don't really see a whole lot of things changing places. Now, you never know. Dune, on top of the award season, could have a surge at the box office, but it's going to be coming out on home media pretty soon. So this could very well be your top 10 for 2021 domestically as well, with Spider-Man No Way Home being obviously the big winner. Before we look at what people are watching on the streaming services, I always like to do a little box office flashback, and this week we are going back to 2012, December 28th through 30th, and this is one of those markets that was very competitive. It was unlike what we've seen this past weekend. The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey in its third week stayed at number 1 with 31.9 million, but Django Unchained was hot on its heels at 30.1 million. It also had opened a few days earlier, so the gross was much higher than 30 million, but even having opened several days earlier, Django was still at number 2. Then you had Les Miserables at number 3 with $27.2 million, so a lot of competition there for that number 1 spot. At number 4 is a movie I don't even remember existing. It's called Parental Guidance. It starred Billy Crystal and Bette Midler, and it made $14.5 million. I don't have any memory of this movie ever coming out, but apparently it did. And at number 5, in its second week, the Tom Cruise vehicle Jack Reacher with $13.6 million. Let's end the show as we always do by looking at what people are watching on the various streaming services, and we'll start with Amazon. No Time to Die is at number 1, also available now for rent as well as purchase. Venom: Let There Be Carnage is at number 2. Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City hit premium video on demand. It enters the chart at number 3. Spider-Man: Far From Home is at number 4. The Amazing Spider-Man is at number 5. The Grinch at number 6. F9 coming back onto the chart at number 7. Spider-Man: Homecoming is at number 8, followed by Free Guy at number 9. And people watching the movie that Mara and I watched on Christmas night, Die Hard, getting it up there on the charts, good enough for number 10. When you look over at iTunes, No Time to Die is number 1 there as well, followed by Venom: Let There Be Carnage and Spider-Man: Far From Home. How the Grinch Stole Christmas is at number 4, followed by The Last Duel. Spencer, which is really still generating a lot of awards buzz for Kristen Stewart as Princess Diana, available for purchase and rental now, comes in at number 6, followed by Free Guy, Spider-Man: Homecoming, The Grinch, and then The Amazing Spider-Man, which was not on the chart last week, jumping into the top 10 this week. And finally, when we look at Netflix, as we've been doing, we are now looking at hours watched and global numbers. The top 10 most watched programs on Netflix globally, and remember, this is a bit delayed on its reporting. This is for the week of December 13th through December 19th. The Witcher Season 2, by a factor of 2, the most watched program on Netflix. 142.4 million hours watched in its first week, followed by the Sandra Bullock movie, The Unforgivable. Money Heist Part 5 drops down to number 3. The first season of The Witcher, so a lot of people, I think, starting the show or catching up before Season 2 started, at 49.1 million hours watched, good enough for number 4, followed by The Queen of Flow Season 2. That drops 2 spots. The original movie Back to the Outback makes an entry onto the chart at number 6, followed by the third season of Titans, which is an original series for Netflix outside of the United States, at number 7. A California Christmas is at number 8. Lost in Space Season 3 drops the most on this chart this week, 5 spots to number 9. And then The King's Affection from South Korea, Season 1, jumps into the overall top 10 most watched programs globally. When you look at the 10 most watched movies, The Unforgivable is number 1, followed by Back to the Outback, and A California Christmas, City of Lights at number 3. Red Notice is still on the chart at number 4, followed by Anonymously Yours at 5. The Shack, Spider-Man: Homecoming, and John Wick Chapter 3, all Hollywood films not available for streaming in the US, but available elsewhere worldwide, are at numbers 6, 7, and 8. And then at numbers 9 and 10, The Christmas Chronicles and The Christmas Chronicles 2, The Chronicles of Kurt Russell as Santa Claus, as I like to call them, both entertaining Christmas movies. A lot of people watching that in the week leading up to the holiday season. And finally, the 10 most watched series on Netflix: The Witcher Season 2 at number 1, Money Heist Part 5 at number 2, The Witcher Season 1 at number 3, followed by The Queen of Flow Season 2 and Titans Season 3. Lost in Space Season 3 and The King's Affection are at 6 and 7. The first season of Squid Game, 14 weeks strong, still on the chart at number 8. And then 2 new entries: Selling Tampa Season 1 at number 9 and The Queen of Flow Season 1, people wanting to start that show, at number 10. And that does it for charts this week. I will be back next week, final numbers or no final numbers, with the first charts episode of 2022. But you don't have to wait until then to see more of this show, because coming up on New Year's Eve, I will have a very special video. It will be called The Year in Coco Melon. And we're going to be looking back at all of the charts this year that included Coco Melon. You'll get to watch my descent into madness as I spiral into conspiracy theories, all culminating in the exciting finale when Coco Melon finally dropped off the 10 most watched shows in the United States chart. It's going to be a really fun video, and fun just to kind of revisit this year, see what was on the charts on Netflix. And, it was just this silly little thing that helped to liven stuff up this year. A lot of you had fun with it. I had a lot of fun with it. So what better way to end the year than by a look back at how Coco Melon dominated so much of the Netflix chart over 2021. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. There's still more to come here on the channel, including my best and worst of 2021. You're going to see that very soon. Also, the Book of Boba Fett premieres tonight. I'll be bringing you my thoughts on the first episode. If you want to see even more of what I'm up to, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. And don't forget that you can listen to everything I do here on the channel as an audio podcast. You can find those links, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, wherever you like to find your podcast. You can probably find the link down there in the description below. Thanks again to our sponsor, Carbon Health. I'll see you back here on charts in 2022, but a lot of 2021 fun still to be had on the channel. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye.